going on, golf fans? It's your boy Gsluke here with our round 2 prop stream for the Travelers Championship. Gonna get you guys ready for all of your exposure on Friday, both on the prop sites like Underdog and PrizePicks, and on sportsbooks with any matchups you're taking for round number 2. Feel free to hit me up with any of those bets you want me to deep dive in the live chat. Smash that like button if you guys haven't already, and even if you don't have anything for me to go through quite yet, feel free to go ahead and say hi down in the chat as well. But we're going to start it off with a look at some of the course conditions, give you guys all the tools and baseline information that you need to go out there and have yourself a day. And then afterwards is where we're going to go through all the deep dives. So if you're here for the Underdog and PrizePicks props, give us 10 to 15 minutes to set the stage before we hop on in. And I can see we already got Big Chief down there in the chat. Cheers to you. Only sipping on water tonight. We got Joseph down there as well. But cheers to all of you nonetheless. But you can see the stat averages on the screen right there. It played to about a -1 scoring average. And it was a little bit of a tale of two halves. So just to say that the field scoring average was -1.1 wouldn't really give you the full detail. So if you take a look at the first versus the second half, the first half of tee times played more than -1.9. The second half only about -0.25 under par. So it was a 1.7 stroke difference between the morning and the afternoon. And with the winds looking pretty substantial for round number 2, I think it's going to be a lot more like what we saw in the afternoon as opposed to what it played like in the morning. So to give you a little bit of a sneak peek for that, you can see the wind gusts are going to be close to 25 miles an hour, and your sustained winds are in the 12 to 15 mile an hour range for pretty much the entire round. So unlike today where you did have at least 3-4 hours of calmer conditions, it's not going to be that way for tomorrow. So the scoring averages should get a little bit more difficult, perhaps closer to a -0.5 scoring average, maybe closer to like 0.75 under. And that might seem even a little bit optimistic to you guys because it only played 0.25 under in the afternoon, but we'll talk about the reason for that here in a second. I think pin locations and tee boxes are going to be set up a little bit easier with the forecast for round 2. You also had a birdie average at about 3.67. That probably drops to about 3.5 per round. Your bogey average was 2.39 per round. I think with the winds, it's going to go up to about 2.5 per round there as well. Maybe even closer to like 2.6, 2.7 per round. Your fairway average should drop ever so slightly. Could be closer to like 9.19 per round. And then your green average, I think, could be even more affected than that fairway average was. Could be down to like 12.5 to 12.75 per round. So the weather being, pretty nasty for the entire day is going to be a cause for a lot of those changes. But as I already hinted at, and as we're going to go through on these pin locations together, it does look a little bit easier, especially on the front 9. But there's enough harder pin locations where unless they're moving up a whole bunch of tee boxes, it's at least going to play a little bit harder than what we had for round number 1. So I don't think it's going to be quite as hard as what we had in the afternoon, but certainly not going to play easier than what we had for the first day. So the first pin location, let's actually get to the PGA Tour site so I can show you guys these exact pin locations. So let's bring up the shot tracker, and hole 1, it's going to be on the front right corner, which is an easier pin location than today. So let's get to the right hole so I can show you all the slopes that we have on this green complex. So it's a shorter shot. It is at the front right corner that is pretty much unprotected too. So though it will be a little bit windier for tomorrow, the whole location will be a little bit more accessible than what we had for Thursday. Next up, we have 2, which is in the back left. I would say a little bit more difficult than today. It is on the wider side of the green, which I guess could be advantageous for getting up and down, but it is going to be a slightly longer wedge shot than what you had in round 1. Next up, we have 3, which is on this middle right corner, probably closer to the back could be the better way to put it, but it's about where my cursor is right now. I would say about the same difficulty as today, maybe slightly more difficult, just because there's a little bit of sloping towards the side here that could take you off this back right corner, but really it's about the same kind of pin location as what they played for today's action. Next up, we have 4, which is in the front right corner, another pin location that is a little bit easier than today. It's a shorter shot in, but you do have this false front to contend with, so it's not like it's going to be a 9-day difference from day to day, and it's going to be a whole lot windier out there. Next up, we have 5, which is a par 3. I will say that on windier days, the tour loves to move up the tee boxes on par 3s. So don't be surprised that, especially on a longer par 3 like 5, that they might move up a tee box or 2 for some of those holes. Pin location, though, pretty much the same as today, but if they were to move a tee box, that could give players a slightly better chance there. Next up, we have 6, which is your first par 5. That is a back left pin location, so it's about where my cursor is now, actually only about 5 or 6 paces from where it was in round 1, so I wouldn't say much of a difference there. Yeah, about the same difficulty. It's still going to be a pretty difficult chip because it's so long to that back left corner. Next up, we have 7, which is a medium length par 4. It is in the front right corner, so it's going to play shorter than today, and it's on the low area, so a little bit more scoreable than Thursday. Next up, we have 8, which is in the front right corner as well, so another shorter pin location, and you'd have to say a little bit less difficulty there as well. Next up, we've got 9. So if you go to 9, that's a shorter par 4. That one's in the very back. So this is an example of one of the harder pins for tomorrow. There's not a whole bunch of these, though. There are a few more on the back side, at least compared to the front side, though. Next up, we have 10, which is front right. That is significantly easier than today, where it was way in that back corner, as you can see. Next up, we have 11, which is in this middle right. I would say a little bit harder than today. So another one of the few holes that could be a little bit trickier, but still a short par 3. So expect to see a good amount of birdies there as well. Next up, we have 12, which is on this front left corner. It's a shorter par 4, and it's an easier pin location. So just like the front 9, there are going to be quite a few scoreable holes with the wind forecast. They don't want to be overly difficult with these players. But 13 for a par 5, this is as hard of a pin as you can get on this hole. It is in the very back left corner, so it's pretty difficult up and down like it was for today. So for moving day, expect to see it on this front left corner, and it will play like 0.6, 0.7 under par on that front right corner. But to this middle back and then this like very back pin location that we have for round 2, it's a little bit trickier than that one. It's still going to be a birdie hole, though, because it's only a 500-yard par 5. So don't get me wrong. Still expect your guys to make a birdie there in most cases. Then we have 14, getting ahead of myself, which is on this front right corner. So it's a little bit easier than today, but it was also a pretty simple pin location round 1. So it's not like it's going to be a 9-day difference there. Finally, at 15, the drivable par 4. That one's in the very back right corner, so it's a slightly harder chip shot than today because it is longer into the green and on top of a shelf. But just like the par 5, it's still going to be a birdie hole. So, expect your guys to make birdie there at least about half the time, but maybe not quite as often as what you had for today. Next up, we have 16, which is a super hard pin location. It's up on a little bit of a shelf on this left side. So, yeah, it's a difficult hole to begin with. Last year, it was the hardest hole on this golf course. So this pin location is going to be kind of nasty, especially with that wind. Then you have 17, which is on the front right corner. This is another one that's pretty nasty because it's just over that water, and it's on a little bit of a shelf to this front right corner. So the last few holes over here on this back 9 are going to have some teeth in them. And then finally, 18 is on this front left corner, which isn't really that bad. It's actually pretty close to where this 2 is. So not that much difficulty change, at least from round 1 to round 2 here. So that's why I think the pin location setup could soften it up a little bit. And that's why I don't think it's going to play as close to this PM scoring average. And then when you add on top of that, the likely possibility that they move up a tee box or 2, I think a half a stroke under par to a minus 0.75 under par scoring average is pretty reasonable for the next day of action. So that's part of the reason why the birdie average I only have going down to 3.5. That's why the bogey average I only have going up to 2.5, 2.6 per round. A little bit of leeway, maybe a 0.1, a 0.2 leeway with both of those categories in either direction. But it should give us a pretty good sense of how this golf course is going to play. We can use that to our advantage for round number 2. So again, I gave you an idea of those bottom averages as well. Now let's translate that into some success. So we had the Underdog board that I was going through quite a bit before we got on the live stream. I have a pretty decent sense for where they have the board. We'll refresh that just so that we can get the latest projections at our disposal. And then, yeah, looks like Prize Picks also is starting to get their board up too. And they didn't have that up before we got on the live stream. So I'm going to do a quick little skim over here before we start talking through specific props and get this thing going. Yeah, the volume is working. Wasn't on the other live stream. That was a little bit of a headache over there. And what's going on, Bill? Great to see you in the live chat. I know we had you on replay the other day, and I'm doing well. likewise over there. I hope you're having a fantastic Thursday night and excited to get after it for tomorrow. So let's figure this out. So Prize Picks looks to have a lot more selection, which was kind of what I was hoping to see. It looked like Underdog had a decent amount of the board posted, but based on what I'm seeing right here, they almost have everyone teeing it up posted on Prize Picks. So they have some guys at 69.5, so that's 0.5 under par, which I think is very reasonable because I think the average is going to be like 0.5 to 0.75 under. And what I noticed on Underdog is that it looked a little bit optimistic for my liking, and that was pretty much in every single category. Strokes seemed like 0.5 to 1 stroke too low in a lot of cases. The green regulation lines were, I thought, all like 1 green too high. The fairway lines I thought were pretty accurate, actually. That was probably the best category for overs and unders that I was seeing. But based on I'm generalizing here. There are going to be exceptions to the rule, of course. Still positive stance plays that could make sense, but the vast majority of the board looked like a whole lot of fade value. And I know I've only just done my first little glance over here on the Prize Pick side, but it looks like they have it priced similar. I mean, they have more guys posted, which is going to be kind of nice to line shop, but the actual projections on these players are almost the exact same from website to website. And I guess the key differentiator is that on Prize Picks, they don't have the multiplier. So we're going to get guys at like even number projections. So like Andrew Novak, for example, who's probably either at 68.5 or 69.5 on Underdog, and then heavily like juiced in one direction or the other. Prize Picks gives us at least for me, it's a more enjoyable experience for betting because you don't have to worry about all those payout shifts on every single prop that you're taking. And looking at this board so far, like 68.5 makes sense for like elite tier players, but like a JJ Spawn, like that could be a fade spot just based on like first look at this point. Shooting -2 is going to be gaining like 1.5 strokes to the field. And this isn't just like some slapdick field. This is one of the best fields in all of golf because it is a signature field event. So gaining 1.5 strokes to the field is asking quite a bit of anyone, let alone somebody that's probably just like an above average player in this sort of case. Like a Sanjay Yim 68.5, like that feels like a slightly too optimistic projection. Ricky Fowler at 68.5. In fact, that might be my favorite prop of anyone that we've seen so far. Just feels like these guys are getting a little bit too much credit from these sports books. And even to have like all these lower tier players at 4 birdies is something that I frankly, I would have them at 3.5. A lot of your lower tier players, because the average for the whole day today was 3.67. But just like I was mentioning with the stroke average being vastly different from morning to afternoon, your average for birdies in the afternoon was about 3.5 per round for the guys that were going off later. So I don't think it's going to change that much because of the pin locations being slightly softer. But if it's going to be like a 3.5 average, a lot of these guys that they have up here at 4 birdies should probably be down at 3.5. Like, especially Gary Woodland. Like, that one kind of stands out to me as like, he's an average to below average player in this kind of field. And that's no diss by any means. This is one of the best fields in all of golf. And he's from my hometown in South Florida. So I have a lot of respect and a lot of love for Gare Bear. So don't take that the wrong way, of course. But like for him to have the same birdie projection as Justin Thomas is blasphemous. It makes absolutely no sense. Like there's no way in the world that the number one birdie maker on the PGA Tour, Justin Thomas, by the way, number one birdie maker that you have in the entire world this year, who had a pretty decent day today as well. It's not like he played terribly in round number 1, should be at the same projection as Gary Woodland, who's well past his prime at this point. So in my opinion, the better side of the value would be on the fades, even over here in Prize Picks, based on what I'm seeing so far. So they have some bogey props posted, I guess like a few more than what it was for round number 1, but still not the biggest selection here. And it looks awfully similar to what it was on Underdog. In fact, I think a lot of guys like Shane Lowry, Henley, Cantlay were at 2.5 on Underdog. And then, of course, the juice was heavily favored towards the under. That's why they're at the 2 mark here in Prize Picks. The fairway board, I'm assuming, is going to look pretty similar, just without the multipliers that we have on the Underdog site. So let's see. Yeah, for the most part, it looks like that. Pretty much in every case, actually. Looks like they did that. Like a JT at 9 fairways, that it feels maybe a little bit high. They have Wyndham Clark at 9 fairways again. Like that feels maybe just a little bit high. The problem is if we're taking all fade value at this point, then the multiplier is just going to stink on a site like Prize Picks. So even on a 2-man, 2.5x, which is essentially plus 150 odds, is a pretty dog shit for a 2-leg parlay. It's almost something that I'll never enter for something like plus 150 odds. I'm usually looking for at least the plus 175, plus 200 if I can. On a 2-leg parlay is about as terrible of odds as I'll take. And that's not even great odds in a lot of cases. The 3x for the 2-man, it's got to be extremely high value props if you're going to cover that sort of implied edge and get a long-term advantage on this sort of a market. I don't love this the fairway board looks awfully similar to Underdog. And, based on what I was looking at before, a lot of these are pretty accurate. Maybe a few unders I would lean on, especially the guys that they have at a flat 9, but nothing that stood out too much. I do want to look at the green board because I also thought they had it a little high in Underdog. And if they're going with the same pricing, then I have to assume that it would be the same thing here. And based on what I'm seeing, it does look like the pricing is awfully similar to Underdog, but yeah, I would still take unders on a lot of these sort of players. So I was looking to see if they had Austin Eckroat posted, who it doesn't look like they have up quite yet. And the lowest projection they have is down at 13 greens, which I just don't understand. I mean, the average today was 13.27, but after, in the PM wave, after the winds came through, it was a little bit below 13 per round. So to have the entire field, every single player that's teeing it up at that number or higher, is assuming that every single player they have posted here is an above average green regulation guy. And that's not the case. Guys like Brian Harman are about that average. There are players on here that are slightly below average, like a Sanjay. So I guess he's at 12.5. I didn't catch that one before. He's the only guy they have at that sort of number. But on Underdog, they actually have even more guys at 12.5, like Eckroat, that I was just pointing out, that should not be at 12.5 and juiced way towards the over. So the first prop that I'm thinking I really want to mix in so far, especially when I was looking at it before the live stream, was this Austin Eckroat under on green. So I'm kind of trailing that sentiment. If I think the average to the field is going to be 13, if not even closer to 12.5, 12.75 per round. And Austin Eckroat, who for the year, this is the green and regulation board that I have loaded up on here, is number 135 in the category. You would think at best would be about that sort of average. So maybe 12.5, 12.75 per round, if not worse than that, because he ranks well outside the top 125 on tour in the category. So for him to be 1.11x for the under, I thought was a little bit of a mistake, because I thought he should be at that number in even money, if not even actually juiced towards the under because of his ranking there. And I know he had a really good round one. He shot -8, was the first round leader, I guess, at this point, or let's see, was he tied? Yeah, tied with Scotty for first round leader. That comes with a lot of pressure, though, heading into round number 2. Not quite the pressure of being a 54-hole leader and trying to close out a golf tournament, but maybe we can take that multiplier, mix it in with another fade on Underdog, and get a decent payout, even if it is a 2-leg slip, because, 2 fades, just like the 2 fades on Prize Picks, you do get pretty shit payouts when you're doing that. So let's see what we can cook up here, maybe using the multipliers to our advantage. And I was looking at some of these birdie lines before, and they looked awfully suspect to me. And I was throwing this one in the shopping cart for a bit because I didn't agree with it that much. But Brian Harman at 3.5 birdies, and you get a multiplier towards the under. Brian Harman on the year, I know it hasn't been a terrible year for Brian Harman, but he's far from elite when it comes to posting birdies or better. In fact, I'm not sure his exact ranking, but let's just go ahead and bring it up here in the live stream. Just like Eckroat, I mean, look at that. He's number 135 on tour when it comes to making birdies. So for him to be so heavily juiced over, and I think the average to the field is going to be about that 3.5 number, just does not make sense. And if you take a look at the shots gained metrics, Eckroat played really well, as you'd expect for first round leader, but he was super putting dependent. He did gain 3.5 strokes putting. So it wasn't like it was all ball striking today. He did hit it pretty decently, but it wasn't like it was all ball striking. Brian Harman was super putter dependent today. In fact, he lost strokes on approach, didn't even hit his irons all that well, and he gained 2.5 strokes between the short game categories. So For our short guy, right, he leaned into his namesake, leaning into the around the green and putting categories for the shots gained short game. Not something that you can reliably do in every single round. So I'm not sure if this will be the exact combination we take. I think I'd like to find like a positive stance play to mix in, because if we could do it, the payout would get even more juiced than what we have right here. But we'll play around with it and see what we can get for a payout. I haven't entered anything quite yet. These boards are just fresh off the board, right? They're ripe for the taking. Little to no line movement on either site quite yet. Let's see what we can cook up. And just before we go ahead and do so, let's catch up on the chat. What's going on, Antonio? He says, are you the only one who hates this tournament in course? Yeah, it's not quite Oakmont Country Club, huh? Like we had last week, but I don't know. It's a tour stop. I enjoy watching some birdies, so I'm not going to complain too much. Can anyone hear this video? Yeah, you should be able to hear it, Doc. It's working for most other people. You might want to check on your volume settings. Thoughts on Rory over 4.5 birdies? He made 6 today and made it look easy. So the conditions would be the issue with that, right? So he's, birdie average probably going to drop to like 3.5 per round. Rory is a well above average birdie maker, so he is going to project well above the 3.5 mark. You've got to ask yourself, should it be a coin flip to get to 5 birdies or better? And I would say that he probably shouldn't be, especially because he was so putting dependent. If you take a look at the shots gained record from today, the reason why it looked effortless getting to 6 birdies is because he gained 3 strokes putting. He was making them all from 10 to 20 feet. That's not something that is sustainable for a lot of these tour players. So could Rory make 5+ birdies again? He for sure could. In fact, an elite tier player like him, I think, has got a pretty decent chance to get that done. However, it's got to be with the ball strike. He's got to figure it out. He's not going to be as putting dependent for all 4 rounds. So that would be me playing devil's advocate with that sort of a prop. So, yeah, I don't think it's a terrible lean, but it's definitely not my favorite. And then you said, do I see any major fatigue with players? So like Scott, Finau, JJ, Minwoo, etc., shooting over par. I think with JJ Spawn, that's fair to say. I don't think so with guys like Finau. I mean, like Finau wasn't ever in contention last week. Adam Scott, you can maybe say the same thing as JJ Spawn. I agree with those two. But like Minwoo Lee, I think that's just trying to make excuses at that point. Those kind of guys more than likely just didn't have their fastball today. But with specific players, like especially somebody that just won their first major, I could see fatigue being a little bit of a factor. But would I play narrative too much in my process? Absolutely not. I think narrative chasing is one of the worst things that you can do when it comes to betting on props. By far, the best value that you're going to find with long-term value is when you take the thought out of it. You take the bias out of it. You just play the numbers. You play the value that you see on paper. And that's really what we're going to focus on today. And he said, do I really take that into account? Maybe like on the Spawn case. I mean, I did fade Spawn today because of that, but only on like very extreme examples. Is that something that I'm going to incorporate? So good question, but not really as much as you would think. So something that I want to do here is I want to take a look at some of the shots gained metrics recently, and I'm gonna move around my setup a little bit so that I have a better chance to actually type and go through this on here. So I want to see who, you can see who I want to see. I want to go through Sanjay first. So I want to see who the worst iron players in the field are. So Sanjay is losing about 0.96 shots gained approach over his last 24 rounds. Harman's been pretty shitty too. That's, I guess, another reason to fade him. But Tom Kim's been terrible. Wyndham Clark is not hitting many greens. Joe Highsmith and Cam Davis, like, no shit. They don't really have props on a lot of these sites. But let's look at Sanjay and let's look at a Wyndham Clark green regulation prop, because, if we can get them juiced towards the under, like get a decent payout on either one, I'd be all for it. So nothing on Wyndham is posted. Let's look at Sanjay. Let's see if he has anything for greens regulation. So yeah, he was at 12 on both sites and he's even money. So if he was 12.5 and we could get that same multiplier for the under, those would have been like no brainers for the under. But like, let's extend our research a little bit. And this is on another tab that I'm looking at this research. Just realized you can't see the entire computer as I go through it. But like a Max Homa, he's losing a 0.4 strokes per round on his approach play. Like, that could be a spot to take a stance against the field. The Tom Kim as well. So let's see what we can do with those two with some line shopping. So Tom Kim, nothing posted. Dang it. So we had the Tom Kim one taken care of. So let's do Tom Kim. We go Harmon, Poston, and then who is the other one? Homa. You already have a Harmon fade in here, but we could always pivot. So Harmon doesn't have any. Let's go to Poston. Nothing for Poston. Let's go to Homa. And nothing posted for Homa. So a lot of these shitty players, I guess they're just not hanging lines out there for. So maybe Eckroat is our best bet to take for the under on greens regulation. But even if you want to look at the last 24, last 12 measured rounds for some of your other research. So like, for example, Brian Harmon over the last 24 round sample size. Maybe another reason to bet against him tomorrow because maybe the ball striking could fall off too. Not even just the fact that he gained those 2.5 strokes in the short game categories, but over that 24 round sample size, he's losing over half a stroke per round with his shots gained to ball striking. So there's another reason that maybe you could take a stance against a player. And then if I was going to take an over, I do think some of these pin locations aren't that terrible. So like I could see myself wanting to take an over at 3.5 birdies. And just to do that research, let's go and find some of the best birdie percentage players that we have on all the PGA Tour. If I click on the right category, we'd be able to find that one a little bit quicker. So let's go to birdie or better percentage. So Justin Thomas is the number one player that we have on all the tour. I don't really want to take like an over at 4.5. Like I'd more so want to take like an over at 4. So like if there was a place to do it, you know, this over at 4 on JT actually isn't the worst thing I've ever seen. Is that a 6x payout? So it's only a 5.25x payout for these three, which I don't really understand. I always thought that they would change it to 6x after changing their payout structure on Prize Picks, but maybe they defaulted it back to what it was before. So yeah, like a JT at 4, right? That could be an option. We'll circle back to Prize Picks here in just a second, but let's see what we can take on Underdog. So like these 4.5s, I don't know, getting to 5 birdies isn't just, it's just something I don't really want to take for my guys heading into round 2. Like maybe a Ben Griffin, and I'll show you why with the shots gained metrics in a second. He kind of stands out as a potential option. Who else? Jaeger, he was somebody I was looking at before too. And you know, like the difference between Harmon and Ben Griffin, and I'm actually not exactly sure where Ben Griffin's going to come in on this list, but he's number 53 on the PGA Tour. So he's at the very least above average in that category. And if we were going to go off the list even more, like a Steven Jaeger could even be a better option to take because he is number 25 on tour in that category. So maybe we throw him in as the guy that we take for the over at 3.5. And this would actually be a 7x payout for those three, which is way higher than normal. So maybe that's the spot to take this 3-leg card. But let's see what else we can work with. So like a Fleetwood is at 3.5. The payout would just be a lot lower than it would be here. I'm not against doing so though, because it's not all about the payout, right? You got to get your props to actually hit to make it count. That's something a lot of people fail to account for when they're putting together their slips. But like Steven Jaeger is a much better birdie maker than a lot of these other guys we have to choose from. And in fact, like a Hovland, he's at 4.5, I believe. Let's see. Actually, I don't even think he has a line posted for birdies, but like even if he did, he'd probably be at 4.5 on these kind of books. Like a Rory's at 4.5. You don't have a Schmid line like Cantlay. I believe he's also at 4.5 birdies. Let's just double check on Cantlay. Yeah, 4.5, and he's juiced pretty heavily towards that underside. Our best option for a 3.5 might be Steven Jaeger, and he might be the one that's the closest to even money as well. So today he did end up making 4 birdies or better, and that was despite missing a lot of really short birdie putts. That was on the better side of the draw, though. So that is something that we want to incorporate, is that it is going to be a little bit windier, which is kind of why I like Ben Griffin. Ben Griffin's a little bit of a better wind player than a Steven Jaeger, but oh, yeah, that does make it slightly tougher to want to choose between the two. Let's look at Fleetwood. Fleetwood's number 48 in birdie or better percentage. He's kind of known for being a good wind player, or at least a lot of people kind of tout him as a good wind player in these parts. If we take a look at the shots gained metrics for him, he also has one of the best shots gained profiles of anyone in the field. He made 4 birdies today on, I think it was the harder side of the draw. Let me just go ahead and confirm that real quickly. Let's go to leaderboard. Let's bring up the tee times, and I just want to check what it was today, because I think he went off later. I could be wrong about that, though. And in fact, yeah, I was wrong about that. He had a 9:55 start. So he was on the easier side of the draw. So scratch that thought. So he was on the easier side of the draw, just like Jaeger. So kind of got to compare those two apples to apples. These positive stance plays, and maybe we don't have to take one because, that hesitation, like those two other plays, like the Harbin under, the Eckert under, they're kind of just like no brainers for me because if I think the average is 3.5 and they're below average players, and yeah, I like the under. You're telling me I'm getting a better payout? Then for sure, right? I'll take those two kind of spots. A lot of these overs, it feels like you're getting a quarter birdie, maybe a half birdie kind of discrepancy in your favor. For these, it was that same sort of value and the extra payout working in our favor too. So maybe the prudent thing to do, and I think what we're going to do here actually is take these two for a two-leg slip. So that'd be a 3.43x payout because you're getting a positive multiplier in both cases. And now the sportsbook odds, they are favored in these directions, right? There's a reason why you're getting the multiplier, but it's not terrible. So Brian Harmon, he's plus 115 for the under. And then if we go to the green regulations and bring up Eckroat, he's also plus 110 for the under. I just vehemently disagree with that, though. So I think the best way to play these would be if you had a positive stance play that you liked. So, for example, let's say that you're a really big Eric Cole fan and you're already looking at his over at 3.5 birdies. You mix that in with one of these two fades, and you're going to get close to a 3.5 to maybe even a 4x payout, depending on which one you mix it in with. And even if it is a Jaeger and you take this for a 7x payout, that could be another way to play it as well. So I'm not exactly sure what the combination I'm going to end up taking for my money is going to be. Of course, guys, Patreon page can be exactly where you find those combinations as I'm mixing them in, but vast majority of the value on Underdog will be on some of these fades. I would say that if you want to make a positive stance play, that you can find some spots where it makes sense, where we pointed out the Jaeger, the Ben Griffin over, which, by the way, I mentioned the shots gained metrics on Griffin. Just to share those, we went through them extensively on the fantasy live stream earlier, but he gained over 2 strokes on approach today, so excellent stuff there. The kind of guy that I'd be looking to take for an over on birdies if you were going to take one, but it's a big if. There's a reason why I emphasized that, and that would be because of the kind of conditions that we're projecting for, which are far from ideal. So, those two fades, I think, can make a lot of sense there. And then on the prize pick side, don't love the 5x payout or the 5.25x that you would get on this 3-man. So I think taking a 2-leg slip would be the better way to go about it. The JT over could make sense. I wouldn't really want to take the two fades together because 2.5x payout, the plus 150 is far from what you want. It's dog shit, in fact, for a 2-leg slip of any kind, especially when they're close to 50-50 props. But which one would I take out then of those two fades? So I just want to do a little bit of line shopping because I haven't looked at these yet on the sports books. Let's see if they have anything for Ricky Fowler. So nothing for Ricky. And then let's see if they have anything for G-dubs in terms of birdies are better. So let's go to birdies are better. Let's look at good old Gary Woodland too. Is minus 150 towards the over, but we've got to ask ourselves, right, is that worthy of being a whole 0.5 higher and us getting the push equity at that 4? Or for him to go over, he's got to get the whole way to 5 birdies, which is asking a whole lot. It's asking a lot more than just going over that 3.5 mark. That's why I still think there's quite a bit of value on that spot. So what I'm going to use to break the tie is we're going to go to Woodland and we're going to compare him apples to apples to Ricky Fowler. So let's bring up our starred players and do exactly that. So today, both of them gained off the tee. Both of them did gain with their approach play, but a short game was much better for Gary Woodland. So, if I was going to fade the ball striking, I guess Ricky Fowler's ball striking is a little bit sketchier than Gary Woodland's was. But even with Gary Woodland's solid round, solid start, -3 and T15, he only got to 4 birdies or better. So, I really like both of these spots, truth be told. I'll probably enter both of these fades for slips that I take for this evening. But the reason why I'm trying to take one of the two out right here is so that we can get a better payout structure on a 2-leg slip. So just for the sake of this, I'm going to take out the Gary Woodland one for now. just because I like the Ricky Fowler fade maybe slightly more. And then we got to figure out whether this Justin Thomas over on birdies is the one that makes sense. And just to go back to the birdie list, yes, he is number one on tour in the category. So if I think the average is going to be about 3.5 per round, let's actually go back to that list because it's going to help us out when we're figuring this out. We got to ask ourselves, how many birdies on average does he gain over the PGA Tour average? And it's very easy to figure this out. So Justin Thomas, with him making birdie on 26.5% of holes, that is equivalent to 4.77 birdies or better per round. The PGA Tour average is 21% of the time. So if we take 18 and multiply that by 21, that is 3.78 per round. So I know it doesn't seem like a big difference there, right? Going from the 21% going to the 26.5%, but that's almost an entire birdie or better difference. Now, this is an elite tier field, so this is you're not going to gain as many birdies to the field at this sort of field as you will for like a regular rinky-dink event that you have around the PGA Tour. But for him to be at 4 birdies probably isn't enough, right? If it's a 3.5, I probably project him for like 4.25 birdies or better per round. So I don't hate that. In fact, we could even make this like a 4-man slip and really go for broke on it. I'm not completely against that. It's just that we're going to have to make the payout work, which is going to be the much harder side to work out here. And just to kind of throw in a fade would only be 8x. Ugh. They really nerfed these payouts after making some of the changes on getting them to 6x. You know what? We're not going to get greedy. We're just going to take this 2-leg slip on both sites. It'll be 3x on Prize Picks with those two combined, and then it'll be the 3.43x on Underdog with those two combined together to giving you some action for round number 2. So that's for the pick'em sites. We are going to go to matchups on the sports books before wrapping this thing up. But as I always say, guys, every single slip I'm entering as I'm taking them and exactly where I'm putting my money behind it, because the combinations might look a little bit different when I enter them myself. Like especially with these two props, I'm going to try and find most likely a positive stance play to mix in with each of them to try and get the payout juiced out even more than what you see right here. But check out the Patreon page for that. Link down below to check out the Patreon page, which is where you can find all of my exposure for these rounds. Let's catch up on the chat next. So he said, thoughts on Dave for round 2? He's low-key playing some good golf, and his strokes line is plus 115 for the under. He's a good wind player, but asking him to gain 1.5 strokes to the field, plus money, I think makes a lot of sense there. I think if he was like plus 120, plus 125, it'd start to get close to where you might be 50-50 or you'd take that side. But I agree with those odds. I think he should be juiced towards the over. And that's coming from somebody that's wearing the Malbon gear and that has a Malbon sweatshirt on. Obviously, one of my top 20 favorite players that we have in the world. So kind of pains me to say that, but I wouldn't say that there's a bunch of value on that one. He said, you feel bad for Dunlop at this point, seeing him struggle. We'll figure it out. It's just one category that's costing them. It's just that off the tee play. And we've seen guys go through a lot lower droughts before. So I'm not frankly that worried about it with him. Have I checked out Harmon's results at this course? It's absolutely insane. I have. He has a lot of top 10, top 20 finishes around here, but that doesn't really change my tune on it that much. He still doesn't make a whole bunch of birdies around here. Like if you look at his track record in terms of actually posting birdie production, he's like a 50-50 prospect on that line. So like even if he's finishing top 10, he's still not making 4+ birdies all that often. It is because he's avoiding a lot of those bogeys. I'm playing him in DFS because of his course history, but it's not that big of my part of my process for props. Because like I said before, like I know you had the narrative question, like whether I'm looking at, fatigue, that kind of thing. I don't do that for props because the edge for props, what I use as an edge at least, right? That's obviously not going to be the same for every single person out there. It's just going off the averages, going off the stats that we have for the year, it being as non-narrative based as humanly possible. And like some of the course history stuff can be pretty narrative based. So I've caught myself at times trying to avoid that kind of stuff. Like, anytime I see myself being a little bit too narrative based, I kind of catch myself and go, no, Luke, these props, the biggest edge on them is always just going by the numbers. So I kind of throw that stuff out, to be honest. He said, that there's weather, but Scotty's line is at 66.5 and the under is minus 120. Yeah, I don't think there's value on that under, man. I mean, to shoot -4, that's gaining 3.5 strokes to the field. I know it's Scotty Scheffler, but that's asking a lot even from him. So I know you're looking at some unders there. I just think that it's going to play harder and that you're asking a lot from these tour pros. This isn't like the Charles Schwab Challenge, right? This isn't like, hell, the Cognizant Classic and going like, okay, go gain 1.5 strokes to the field. Like, I'm okay with that with Jason Day at the Cognizant Classic, 1.5 strokes. Not in this field. This is a better than a major championship type of field. You don't have any slapdicks at the bottom end of the board. It is literally only the top 70 players that we have on the PGA Tour at this point. That's why it's a much different thing for me. So yeah, I don't think that's necessarily value. Not that I'd say I'd take the over, but like I do think that you would lean under on those, but I don't think they're drastically off by any means. Let's go through some matchups now, which I was eyeing up a little bit before we got on the live stream. And we're going to go with the head-to-head matchups without any sort of tie, because the odds on the ones with the tie can be a little bit janky at times. And because we have some windy conditions, I'm not against taking some more veteran players, because especially the guys that are known as grinders, you can sometimes find an edge on those players when it comes to the matchups. But unless I have the shots gained metrics that also back up that kind of analysis, you're not going to see me taking a lot of those players here. So let's go through it, see what we can find. Maybe some guys that are gaining ball striking, going up against guys that got a little bit lucky with the putter. Speaking of getting lucky with the putter, Taylor Pendrith gained over 3 strokes putting today. So like he could be fade material if Eric Cole is showing us any semblance of a pulse. Unfortunately, though, he lost strokes ball striking today, so not really giving us that pulse that we'd be hoping for if we're taking a fade. Siwoo versus Dietrich. Siwoo should be the favorite. In fact, I think he should be even bigger favorite than what he is. Maybe it's the putting stats that are kind of scaring the sports books off of him. Let's look at Thomas Dietrich. Dietrich lost across the board and then gained with the putter. You know, they both struggled today, so it's not like one played well and one didn't, and that's why the odds are kind of thrown off. That -140 isn't the worst thing I've ever seen. Let's go Straka versus Rye. That's even money. I don't agree with that. I know Rye had a better day than Straka today, but Straka is like clearly the better player. So Rye, he was okay across all 4 categories, gained off the tee, lost an approach, gained the ground to green, and then lost with the putter. Sepp, terrible day. He lost in 2 of the 4 categories. Give me Sepp, though, at even money. That feels disrespectful to the kind of year that he's had. He's been a top 10 player, top 5 player on tour for most of this season. Shane Lowry only being -135 against McCarthy also feels like a mistake. I kind of really like what I'm seeing here. JT only being -130 versus Hideki. I don't agree with that. I think he should be a much bigger favorite, especially based on how they've played over the last month or so. I don't think it's been particularly close. I agree with the coin flip between Xander and Morikawa. Those 2 players are grading out pretty much on the same level right now, I'd say, between those 2. Taylor, Taylor should be favorited. I don't know if I could take him again, though, after he had that really good round 1. These mid to lower tier guys, sometimes they have a little bit of a letdown after that -4, -5 days. So I might stay away from that one, but I would definitely lean on that Taylor side. He's been playing great golf all year, great golf over the last month. You's just kind of been okay all season. So I think -125 probably isn't enough juice on Nick Taylor in that scenario. But who else do we have on here? So a lot of that seems like a pretty decent coin flip. Should definitely favor Hughes, but like a +120 on Schmidt, that feels slightly disrespectful on especially a player that I think this is probably closer to a coin flip than that -150 that they're hanging on Hughes. Thompson, Jaeger, that's maybe slightly favor Thompson. Yeah, I don't disagree with that one. Hovland, I think, should be favored over McIntyre. Like, Hovland's been really good for a month at this point, not just the last couple weeks, like McIntyre's kind of showed up in. Rory's only -130 over Keegan. I hate to say that, like, Rory is being disrespected, but he is. That's wild. That makes no sense. Rory should definitely be a much bigger favorite than that. These matchups are probably what I'm going to end up going with. And I actually prefer the three balls a little bit more because we can get closer to that plus 160, plus 170 odds on a lot of players that I think have a pretty good fighting chance. But because it's two balls, we're left with a slightly different situation. These are the kind of props that I'd be mixing in. And whether you want to play them as straights, maybe take some like, 2-3 leg parlays with these sort of two ball matchups, which might be the move because some of them are like minus 125 to minus 130 juice. But I think that they're all decent values on each case. Like guys like GT that are playing much better golf than Hideki, like I think the juice should be closer to minus 150. Same thing on like a guy like a Rory, a Shane Lowry should probably be closer to like minus 150 as favorites. So I don't think that they're like drastic values, but like I don't think that they're the worst bets either. And these are the kind of things that I'd go for the two ball market. And the two ball markets, because of the house edge that they put in there, which is usually minus 110, sometimes it's minus 115 on some of these sports books. It's not easy to find a big edge on a lot of these markets, but these are off by like 20 points or so in most cases, maybe like 25, 30 points in some cases. So they get over that threshold, in my opinion. So that's why I'd mix them in for some of those straights. I will bet all of these straights. That'll be how I handle them on Hard Rock Bet. Unfortunately, I'm not sure if they have a board posted for Hard Rock yet, so I'll actually just take a look at that now to see if I can mix in any right on now for our exposure. But what I usually do is I wait to see what Hard Rock posts for these a little bit later on. And as long as they're somewhat reasonable odds comparatively, I'll end up taking them. And as of right now, they only have their custom head-to-heads posted on Hard Rock Bet. They don't have any of these actual two balls posted. So for all the two balls and any of the head-to-heads I end up playing as well, make sure to check out the Patreon page for that. But these will for sure be the two balls I go with. The ones that you'll find over there on the Patreon page, once I have enough time to go through the entire board, would be some of like the custom matchups that they post on Hard Rock Bet, which for today, they hung some pretty decent ones out there. We had the Sam Burns matchup that we cashed from round one. And then the other one, Nick Taylor, we ended up having a custom matchup for that they had posted on the Hard Rock Bet. So I'm definitely going to take a look through that board, but need a few minutes to refreshen up, take a look through the board, and do our due diligence there after doing all these live streams here on YouTube. So that's all I've got, guys. Best of luck with all of your exposure for round number 2. I hope to see us into the green on a lot of these slips. Hopefully we can cash out on those prize picks and underdog props that we were pointing out before, and we can have ourselves a weekend here at the Travelers Championship. So if you haven't already smashed that like button, go ahead and do so. Also subscribe to the channel so you guys don't miss any of the content to come. Rounds 3 and 4 we'll be doing the same thing, getting you guys prepared for all the weekend's action. So make sure to stay tuned for all of that. And for the fantasy live stream, you guys can find that over there on the Ship It Nation YouTube channel. That's where all of our DFS live streams have been for the last few months and where they'll be for the rest of this event and the rest of the PGA Tour schedule. So over there, it was this evening at 7 p.m. Eastern time is where we went through the weather, the shots gained metrics, all of that stuff from the fantasy perspective. This live stream, of course, is where you get all your prop stuff for round number 2. So, keeping it separate so that you can find the information that you're looking for a little bit easier. So make sure to check that out if you guys are also entering on the fantasy side of things. And I also will note that I do have fantasy projections on my website as well on my Patreon page. So if you're part of the Patreon page and you have that full membership to golf, not only do you get the underdog and prize pick stuff that we talked up through here, but also all the DraftKings projections and the spreadsheets for round 2 through 4 over there. But it's all I've got, guys. I appreciate you guys stopping by as you guys always do. And best of luck with everything that you're going with.